Welcome to The Chase, episode 4. Today we are going to be talking about prayer life and prayer in general. So, to kick it off, what do we generally think of when we hear that Christians should have a prayer life? What is a prayer life? What do you consider, Jacob, as a prayer life? Yes. The man in the hat.
The man in the hat. That's my new nickname.
Your Dr. Seuss character. Sorry, go ahead.
When I think of having a prayer life, it's definitely something that I need to practice more. That's the first thing that comes to my mind. But I think of Jesus. I don't know, every time we talk about any of these topics, I think of Jesus because that's who I serve every day.
Yeah.
And I think of all the times that he constantly was in prayer, and the fact that him dying on the cross means he's interceding for us daily. And so it's kind of the thing that I think of most, and what I consider prayer is, there's times that I don't have time to stop and just get on my hands and knees and pray to God. And so throughout the day, I just let him know that I'm thinking of him. I think conversation with God could also be prayer.
Oh yeah, for sure.
Just, hey God, I just want to acknowledge you throughout the day, like constantly. It's like meditating on his word day and night. Just thinking about God, just like, Lord, and having a heart of gratitude. And I think there's so many aspects of prayer that you can go to, but just that constant daily. I think it's a daily thing that if you're finding yourself with empty headspace, just being like, oh God, what do you want to say to me? Or thank you. Just a simple thank you, like thank you for everything.
Yeah.
That's me. What about you? Bobby Bones.
Yeah, kind of in the same place. You mentioned that Jesus is kind of your example, and it says in Luke 5:16, but Jesus often withdrew to lonely places and prayed, and like he was that example as well. And, I think it's important to find time by yourself to pray, and that just you and him, and have that kind of be your time to spend together.
Yeah.
Personally, I don't do that as often as I should, but what I am good at, and what I do try to make sure I do, is just kind of always having that open communication with God. Like just always,
that's good.
Something kind of comes across my mind. It's like,
right,
God, what do you think about this?
Yeah.
And I knew a guy that once said that it was almost to the point where he's going down the grocery aisle and looking at peanut butter, and he says, God, what kind of peanut butter should I get?
Yeah, that's awesome.
And it's just, yeah.
It's a relationship.
Exactly.
I love that because, if I didn't talk to my fiance every day and didn't consult in her and things I buy and things I do, and it'd be a short relationship. Let's just say that.
And one of the things I think that we often forget as Christians is listening, right? Like, how often do we take time and we have prayer time for God, but all we're doing is sitting there listening to God, just waiting, just waiting for his voice, just waiting for him to speak to our hearts.
Yeah, I think it's very important because I feel like we can use God as almost a genie in a bottle a lot of times, and we only approach him when something goes wrong or we need something, or it's like, oh yeah, about God, might as well go talk to him because I neglected that for weeks, months, days. And I think that I find it very challenging. I wish I had this quote, but Charles Spurgeon wrote a book called Intimacy with the Almighty, and he said that he had to force himself to be quiet in God's presence till the monkeys in the cage stopped chattering. It's because, like, if you ever see a monkey that's in a cage, it's like, it's like shaking the cage and it's rattling and jumping all around. And then he said that's almost what his mind was like every time he would go and sit in God's presence, but he just practiced quiet. being still and listening, instead of approaching God with things to say. And then that's when he started the intimacy with the Almighty. And that's when he really started to even know what to pray. Because I feel like once he stopped thinking about what he wanted to say and started listening to what... Because I feel like God inspires our thoughts and our words. And I think that being still and being quiet and going... I feel like so often that's forgotten and not even... No, people don't even think about it. Because before I read that book, I didn't even think man, I've never really just sat and not fallen asleep, you know? Close my eyes and I wake up, it's tomorrow. And, just taking that time, just being still and quiet in his presence, I think is very important.
Take some practice. It's definitely hard to do the first time you try it, or if you haven't tried it in a while,
Quieting the monkeys.
Yeah, quieting the monkeys. I like that. And then 1 Thessalonians 5:17 says, pray continuously. I mean,
that's pretty straightforward.
Yeah, it reiterates just this whole idea of always having open communication with God.
Why do you think it's so vital for Christians to have an active prayer life?
Well, it's like you said, I mean, with your fiance, if you don't talk to her, you don't know her. If we don't talk to God, we don't know his will. We don't know what he wants for our lives. We can't know his will for, or even, kind of what he desires out of us, right?
Yeah.
I mean, not every Christian is the same. Not every person is going to have the same things that's required by God, or what God wants from you. So
I started tearing up right now. I started thinking earlier what was said about how Deb said that God whispers because he's close. And I think that can go back to that being in that quiet time. Is we can't really hear a whisper when we're busy talking. And my fiance, she can't hear out of her left ear very well, and she's very soft-spoken. So I have to be very attentive to listening. And I think God gave me her for even more of a reflection of who he is, because God he's there, he's close, he's whispering, but it's kind of hard. If I was to keep talking and you were trying to whisper something to me, I'd be like, wait, did you say something?
yeah.
Yeah.
Let's see.
In Matthew 6:6 it says, "But you, when you pray, go into your room, and when you have shut the door, pray to your Father who is in secret place, and your Father who sees in secret will reward you openly." And I think that so often it's easy to say, "Hey, I'm praying for you," or "Hey, have you gone to God for this?" "Yeah, I've talked to God about it, man. I think I should buy this car, and I think I should get this house, or I think God's calling us this way," and then you really haven't spent that intimate time with the Lord in that secret place. And I think it causes the destruction and the fault of many people. And I don't know, maybe have you experienced that in your life where you say it, that you are spending time with the Lord, and I don't want to call you out, like say you're spending time with the Lord, that you're praying for someone and never really truly go to God for that?
Yeah. Oh yeah.
I know
I'm sure I'm not the only one.
Before I just leave you taking arrows there.
Right.
I do that very often, more often than I should.
Yeah, sometimes, I get into this rut or, familiar territory of playing the part of Christian and saying, I'm going to pray for you, and then go throughout the week and I get distracted by other things. And it's like,
yeah,
man. And then I go back to that person, or I see the person later, like, I didn't really do that, did I?
Oh, glad you're doing well.
Despite my forgetting.
It shows how gracious God is.
Yeah.
And how he's interceding for us even.
I need it every single day.
I love, prayer is written to the Bible. Jesus, the dude was praying every time he got a chance, getting alone with God, to pray and seek his Father's will. And I think that if Jesus was on this earth, fully God, fully man, and still had to seek his Father's will, how much more do we as Christians have to seek his will for our lives? Like, I think that's crazy. Jesus, he already knows why he's here, but he says, Lord, what's your will? Your will be done, your kingdom come, you know.
Mm-hmm.
He still was praying that prayer on earth.
Do you think he was just trying to be, or not trying, sorry. Do you think that was mainly for the purpose of,
The benefit of us.
yeah, being the example?
I think from what I would say is, it says that God even used Jesus, but he fully experienced everything man did, but the only thing different between us and him is he perfected everything. And I think that Jesus, being human, still needed, I think that he knew that Jesus would have to go through things as human so that we can say, wait, well, God didn't do that. Be like, yes, he did. He did, he go. So I would say, I guess I would agree with you that it was for our benefit, that very well, I mean, he says, saying like, I can call angels anytime I want to save me. Just like he didn't have to know God's will. It could have been in his mind already because they're always in communication.
Right.
But I think he cares about us that much in that detail that he did. He went through what we needed and are going to have to go through in our lives.
Yeah. So he still did mean to pray and ask God.
I think he did. I think that it was, so I mean, he needed to eat, he needed to sleep, just like a human. I think that there's many things that he still needed to do as human. And I think that he did it so that, because you look at human, it's like, there's always like that, oh, he didn't do it, why do I gotta do it?
Right.
You know, and then I think God knew that. I think he's known that. He knew man, he created us. And so he knew that we'd find somewhere in the Bible with, well, he didn't do it, so what do I gotta do it? You
That's
know?
a good point. That's a good point. We have that terrible tendency, don't we?
Keyword terrible.
Terrible.
I love this. So there's so many different aspects of prayer. I get really excited about prayer because I've seen people from the worst state of their lives, close to death. My own father, close to death, and prayer is what made him still alive and where he is today. And prayer is what's brought my family to the financial well-being that they're in right now. And I've just seen prayer like, and it wasn't always that. And I think that's important to know is the financial well-being, the health. That's after years of praying and going through hardship. And I think that's really important. I feel like so many people get the end result of prayer after years, and you see like, oh, there's a spiritual leader who's has a stable life and just loves the Lord. And it's like, it wasn't always that. There was always that fear of stepping out in faith and moving to Missouri, and then moving back to California, and then moving to Missouri. And there was a lot that went into that. But not along with that is how prayer wins battles. And I really think that, like, I think back to the stories when they were fighting the battle and he had his hands raised and they were winning as long as his hands were raised. I believe it was Moses, correct? Me if I'm wrong.
Yes.
Yes, it was Moses.
Yeah.
And they would lift his hands, and whenever his hands would drop, they would lose.
Right.
And so that brought brothers along to lift his hands. So I think that's, I don't know, what are your thoughts on that? I think that's powerful.
Yeah, that was what you sorry. What you just said coinciding with this verse, Philippians 4:6. Do not be anxious about anything, but every situation by prayer and petition with thanksgiving present your request to God.
Philippians 4:6, correct?
Yeah. So I mean that's when you're kind of in these situations, you don't know what's going to happen, or you're worried about something. God's word says, don't worry about it. Just talk to me, and it's I'll give you peace, and it's gonna work out. And situations don't always work out the way maybe we want them to.
No.
But they're gonna work out for our better because God loves us.
Yeah, I love that. It's like you're a dad, and there's things that I'm sure your kids want, but it may not be what's best for them, and so you give them something It's like, I know you want candy, but I'm going to give you vegetables because in the long run, you're going to be strong and have your vitamins and things that will benefit them in the long run. Healthy. I love, you said it's just simple, going and talking to God. And I interned with Kendall Alfaro at James River Church, and he was talking to me about prayer and how people they make prayer complex and confusing and almost like eerie, like you don't want to go near it sometimes because it seems so, holier than thou. And he said he was sitting next to the lead pastor, Pastor John Lindell, and he was sitting there as right when he came on staff, and he said, I was listening to Pastor John pray, and he said, Dad, we need your help. We need you to go before us. And he said it was so simple, so profound, that it changed the way that he ever talked to God. Because it was just like, that's who he is. He's our Heavenly Father. And it's like, we need your help. We need you to go before us. And it was something that the church was going to have going. And it was so simple. And then he continued praying, just talking to God. Just, Lord, we have so many people coming. We don't know how we're going to seat them all. Provide us a building. You know, just things like that, just talking to God. And I love it because it's just like, I can go to my dad, my earthly father, for anything. I can talk to him about anything and everything, sin in my life. I can talk to him about things I'm going through, things I'm feeling. And how much more so can I go to Jesus, who knows the hairs on my head. He knows every breath I breathe because it's borrowed from him anyways. You know, and I love it because you can just go to him. Again, I'm sure you can kind of experience that as being there for your kids. You kind of get, I don't know, I'm not a father, so I don't know.
So you mean as far as...
Just as your kids come to you, how much more you can go to God.
Yeah. I think about that sometimes. And, it makes me realize, not that I'm a bad father, but that compared to God, I'm nothing. And, you know,
I'm sure that's humbling.
Yeah, it is. Because God is just so much better at doing the dad thing than I ever will be. And that's comforting. It's very comforting.
Yeah, because where we fail, God succeeds.
That's right. I want to read James 5:16. It says, "Therefore confess your sins to each other and pray for each other so that you may be healed. The prayer of a righteous person is powerful and effective." So that was kind of the other thing I was thinking about while you were talking about, the pastor you were...
Pastor Kendall Alfaro.
Yeah.
Pastor John Lindell.
And it's... Sometimes we lose sight, like we try to think of the right words and try to think of the right thing to say. And you know, prayer anyways is your heart communicating with God, right?
Yeah.
But when because you're made righteous, because He lives in you already, your prayers don't go unanswered.
Yeah.
Right? They're heard, and it doesn't necessarily matter what you say, though God will give you the words regardless. But
yeah, it says in 1 John 5:15, it says, "And if we know that He hears us, and whatever we ask, we know that we have petitions that we have asked of Him." And it's saying, basically backing up your words is just saying, if we ask God of it, we know that He hears us.
mm-hmm.
But it kind of goes back to like a dad giving vegetables instead of candy may not be always what we ask for.
Yeah. Cool.
What would you say would be the downfall of lack of prayer?
Ooh, that's a good question. I think you lose touch with who God is.
What would that look like? Like losing touch with who God is, how does that affect your life? Or
Well,
maybe you've
yeah, I
seen
guess I've been
someone
there.
else's life?
to some degree, I'm sure everybody has, but, I've gotten to the point where my relationship with God becomes stagnant. I feel like that's kind of how we become stagnant as Christians, is that when we stop making the effort to have a prayer life, when we stop making an effort to read His Word.
When you say stagnant,
I mean, God
just like what?
falls out of first place in your life. I mean, He falls to like fourth, fifth, maybe, whatever.
Yeah.
So your mind isn't there, your heart's not there. Church becomes this repetitive place that you go to, and it doesn't mean anything to you.
Yeah. I think that with like talking about love being in the details and prioritizing prayer, that it's a way of us showing God that we love Him and that we appreciate Him. Because, say someone is in your life and they do something awesome and kind for you, but you never communicate with them again. You're just I wouldn't really feel loved or appreciated if I help someone and they no thanks, see you later, never talk to you again. I think that us showing God that, I think prioritizing it just in this world in general is whatever you prioritize is your God. And so if we prioritize anything, if I wake up and I think about my Xbox, if I wake up and I think about Lily, those are my gods before God is. And I think that when we take time to prioritize prayer, it not only puts God at first, but it just shows Him that, hey Lord, I'm thinking of you. I know that you're thinking about me every second of every day, that you love me, and I just want you to know that the relationship that I have is mutual with you.
Yeah. I think He appreciates that.
Oh yeah.
I know I would.
Yeah.
But I'm not saying I'm not saying I'm God or anything.
I'm not waking up thinking about you, Bobby.
No. not what I meant. But let's see, what was the other thing? There was a verse, and I don't have it. But it was another aspect.
Verses, Bobby. There's a lot of verses.
There's a lot of verses, especially even with prayer. But there was one where it was talking about you have to believe and not doubt, right?
Mm-hmm. Yes.
So kind of
faith like a mustard seed.
Right. What are your thoughts on? Do you kind of have to have this idea in the back of your mind where you're constantly telling yourself to believe in what you're asking for?
Yeah, I think that's one of the greatest life challenges. Is faith. It's living by things not seen, living and believing things not seen. And it says it takes faith like a mustard seed to move a mountain. But a lot of times you look at, Peter, I believe, that walked on the water. And he walked out to Jesus and he just believed that God was, those first few steps he believed, but then when he lost sight of, I think that's a perfect example of our prayer life. It's Lord, I believe that you're going to heal. Lord, I believe you're going to heal. And then you're it's not happening. I'm not believing. I'm looking at the results of the doctor. And then you start to look at all these things, these results, these things on paper are the things that the doctors are saying. And I think it's the same exact thing that happened to Peter. He looked out at God and he stopped believing. And I think that his life could be an example of our prayer life. And then God comes in and he's I got you. Even though you lack in faith, I am great.
Yeah.
And I think that's awesome.
Yeah.
I think, I don't know, that just came off the top of my head. But.
No, that's good. That's good.
I know it's faith and prayer is a hard thing. It definitely it's easy to say, pray and believe, healing will happen. You're struggling with finances, pray to God. Your family's split, pray to God. It's but until you get into that moment, I had 2 tires explode on the way to work, 2 different ones. I just got new ones, and then I had one hit a curb and blow up, and then it's God, why is this happening? And then you look at your bank account and you're oh, I'm saving up for a wedding, I was like, but now they're drained into this car, and and you start to like, it's like when you get in those moments, it's like, I had to remind myself, God's got a plan. I wouldn't be going through this without Him by my side. And I don't like saying that. He wouldn't be putting you through this if you're not strong enough. I think He wouldn't put you through this without you knowing that He's with you through it. Because life is not fair sometimes.
Right.
All the times. Life is not fair, and life is not what people promise it to be. And I think it's important to know that God is with you through it. Like what we said earlier, God whispers because He's close. And that's what is key to faith and key to that mustard seed boldness, is that you just got to remind yourself that God's close and that you got to keep your eyes on Jesus. And that's why continuously, He said pray continuously.
Yeah.
It's a continuous thing, because if you don't, this world can be very loud and distracting.
Yeah.
Just go on Instagram and you'll be there. Facebook videos, you'll be there for hours watching dogs and cat videos.
Mm-hmm.
People hurting themselves with trampolines.
While entertaining, it's not the best for your faith.
Yeah. Trampoline videos are not of the Lord. No, I'm kidding.
One more final thing that I kind of wanted to share as far as the personal testimony.
Share away.
Concerning faith and praying continuously and not giving up. My grandfather, for years upon years, excuse me 1 second, sorry, was a smoker. And so eventually I took it upon myself to start praying for him and his smoking, because I could see that it was a bad thing. Like at this point I was probably preteen, like 11 or 12, somewhere in there.
Oh, wow. Yeah.
And so I prayed, and youth group or children or wherever I was, I would constantly be asking prayer for him. And one day, come home, my mom tells me that my grandfather had come home from work and told my grandma where all his hidden packs of cigarettes were, told her to throw them away, quit cold turkey,
Wow.
and everything. And
Wow.
I just, not to shine on myself, but I didn't give up. I believed in God for the miracle, and it happened. It was an amazing testimony to God's faithfulness and God's love for us.
Yeah, definitely. You look at any church today that having a healthy population, and I was reading a book, and the author was like going to the pastor of the church and was like, why is your church so successful? Why are there so many people? Why are healings happening? Why is this happening? It's like, what's happening? What's your secret? And they went, he's like, here, I have to show you something. He took them down to the basement of the church. There are people on their hands and knees praying. And he says, no, this area is constantly swapping people out whenever they have time, and it's in 24 hours of prayer for this church. And I read that, I was like, wow, that's amazing. That's the consistency of prayer, and that's it's cool that you got to live that out.
Yeah.
Consistent prayer.
Yeah. It's easy to become discouraged, but man, you just keep going, keep trusting God. It won't disappoint you. All right. Jacob, any final notes? If not, that's okay.
The last thing that I would say is that don't let prayer become a chore. Let prayer be something that, man, you just desire to be with God. Pray that prayer. I dare you to pray the prayer, Lord, help me have a fire to want to spend time with you. A love for you. Help me to passionately fall in love with you. Because I had to pray that prayer before I ever started. I was like, prayer. Thank you, Lord, for my food. And You know, just don't let it be a chore. Let it be a blessing in your life.
And until next time, chase God and chase His word.
What?
I